जगदम्बे हे माँ दुर्गा जय जगदम्बे हे माँ दुर्गा.
I have to say we had a most amazing morning this morning at the service. It was so great to see people I had not seen in a long time. Most of the people I saw today I knew before I had glasses. Before we start out with our wonderful slideshow of Mother's life, we wanted to make an announcement that there will be a portion of the program for recollections. People can come forward and give a 5-minute recollection of some aspect of their working with Mother, or being a friend to Mother, or being a relative to Mother. And here's how we'd like to plan that. First priority will be given to anyone in the family who'd like to say something, followed by any of Mother's caregivers during the last 10 years. And then after that, people who've had a personal experience with Mother that they would like to share with everyone, something meaningful that would uplift everybody. And we don't need people to come forward and rehearse the teachings for us or tell us things we've heard before. We would really like to hear something from you, from the heart, that's very meaningful about your interactions or experiences with Mother. So Tracy Busa, where's Tracy? One thing I learned from Mother was to be focused. And to be focused, you have to rein in your peripheral vision. In fact, one time I was on the phone with Mother, and I'm sure I was saying something completely stupid. She said, "Deborah, you must put on your thinking cap." And I said, "Okay, I will." "No, I want you to put down the phone. I want you to reach out and get a cap and put it on. And I want you to say, 'I'm putting on my thinking cap.'" I felt somewhat stupid, of course, but after I put it on, amazingly, I was brilliant. So this is Tracy. I have lots of stories like that, but that was less than 5 minutes. So if you would like to be part of the 10 who come forward with a recollection, please see Tracy, and we will put you on the list. And then you will be seated in one of these seats up here, the 10 seats, so we can keep you moving. Now, I'd now like to welcome up Aaron, Moira, and Tatiana, who will now introduce the next portion.
Thank you, everyone. We are truly overwhelmed to see so many of you out here today. We're not going to spend a lot of time going over what happened today. I just simply want to take a moment to honor my sister Moira, my sister Tatiana, my former stepfather Edward Francis, my niece Chantal, for getting up and sharing their memories and their stories and their inspiration today. It really made it all very special. And also, again, of course, thank you to all the ministers. You'll notice I have a flower that I'm carrying with me. This is one of the flowers that was on our mother's casket today, and the family we put the flowers with her in the cremation chamber, but the family took out a few, and this has become very, very special to me, and I can't let go of it right now, so I'm carrying it. So we are, and Moira and Tatiana will chime in as appropriate. We have prepared, and it's really pretty amateur slideshow. I think we had hoped to have time to make it a little bit better, but it's basically our mother's life story, both her public life and her private life in one narrative. So we're just going to go through, and we'll make little comments as we go along. And for those of you who aren't aware of what the scene is, we'll set the scene a little bit. As you know, our mother was born April 8th, 1939, 70 years ago. Here she is in her pram in New Jersey. And she used to talk about the pram. In fact, she had her mother get her one very similar to this that she used to wheel the four of us around in when we were little.
Her mother had been a governess both in London and New York. That's our grandfather, Captain Hans Wolf. He was originally from Hamburg, West Germany, or Germany at the time. He joined the first he joined the German Navy during World War I when he was 14 years old. Eventually made his way to Venezuela. He had joined the Merchant Marine, and he ended up being a captain on a Standard Oil tanker in Lake Maracaibo on the lake. This is a picture of him in South America.
Yes, I think that this was actually taken in Trinidad, where he had moved after being in Venezuela. And you can see just sort of this intense German personality coming through here in his white suit. And he's very used to being in command and being obeyed. At this time, he actually owned a plantation in Venezuela. And there's a very interesting story, which I'll let Tatiana go into as we go through, about how he actually met our grandmother. So here he was, you know, it's the early 30s, right, the mid-30s, and he's living down there, and along comes Miss Frida Ankerly.
Frida Ankerly was born, I think, about 1896. She was raised in the French part of Switzerland. I forget the exact canton, but it's near Geneva. And she eventually moved to England, and like I said, was a governess, and ended up in New York as a governess for a brother and a sister. When this brother and sister were probably young adults, they decided to go on a bird watching expedition to South America. And they actually met in Venezuela at, I guess, a restaurant at the port. And when she was traveling with this pair, she met Captain Wolf.
On the bird watching expedition. But you can see her there. She's very, it's a little, you know, looks a lot like sort of Banana Republic type clothing. I don't know if we included one of her with her boots.
It was a very fast courtship. They instantly got along because they were of a similar age, and they were both from Central Europe. He from Germany and she from Switzerland. And they very quickly decided that they were going to move to America, made arrangements, and ended up in New York. Got married very quickly after that. It was probably about 1937.
So this is them in front of the plantation house, which was eventually, the plantation was eventually sold, and Hans actually used that money to invest in a boatyard in New Jersey.
Betty Clare was born in a different house than she grew up in April 8th, 1939. The yachts that our grandfather built were called the Sea Wolf because his last name was Wolf.
So here's Betty Clare, as she was called when she was younger, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, named Elizabeth after her mother's sister, and named Claire after Claire Weber, who was one of the children that her mother watched. And you can see this other girl in the picture here is...
I believe this was Elvira. There was a Greek family next door. Her whole life, still lived there when I used to go back and visit. And she used to run over there and eat dolmadis and several other Greek delicacies. And she just loved playing with the Greek neighbors in the yard.
This is just another picture of her on the porch.
So she attended Red Bank schools all her life. She was known as she played clarinet in band. She was known as the Bennett Goodman of Red Bank High. I saw that in her yearbook. What else?
Well, just that this was their family home from the time she was about 6 months old until she went away to college, and this had been an old farmhouse. And her father, you can see the three of them standing in front of the house. Her father did a lot of work to fix up the house and make it beautiful when he wasn't working on his boatyard.
He built a dollhouse in the backyard for her. It was excellent craftsmanship, the German way. He was a mathematician and he was more than handy, I'd say. He planted this garden, and it was like a little paradise back there. She was an only child, so I think they built that wonderland for her partially because of that.
Yes, of course, this would be where the sandbox was, where she had her famous past life recollection that she used to like to talk about. And here's a picture of her as she's growing up. Tatiana actually spent almost 2 years interviewing our mother about her life. And much of what we know about her early life comes from that time after Tatiana had just gotten out of college. And she spoke earlier about how she'd been almost like a sister to our mom, and that was that time period. And you can see here in this picture, I mean, looks a lot like Tatiana, our mother did. Tatiana looks a lot like her mother. This is a picture right at the end of World War II when her mother took her on a trip over to Switzerland to see all of her relatives over there who, of course, had been so affected by the war.
They were going to see her grandmother on her deathbed, and they made it back in Switzerland. And so our mother used to tell us that story. I think this picture actually looks a lot like Moira, because different angles and images.
And this is Mother with one of her cousins in Switzerland. She talked a lot about how much she enjoyed the trip, and she went to see the family farm in Uteville, if that's how you say it. And here she is with her father and their dog, Barry. And she talked a lot about Barry when we were growing up, and how she used to try to trim his nails and keep him clean.
Except she said Barry.
That's true. That's true. Never Barry. Barry. Barry.
We grew up in California with this flat accent. Like when people say caulking, in California they say cocking. So our mother always said Harry and orange, of course.
Here's Hans at the wheel of one of his sea wolf vessels, and he actually had, I think we have a picture in here of his men, but he had about 20 men working for him, and they built quite a few, both yachts as well as lifeboats for the Navy and the Coast Guard during the war. So it was quite a production and operation that they had the family going there. And here's the family a little bit later on when she was about 11 or 12 years old. And here you can see her again with Barry. And if you look closely in her lap, there's a couple of squirrels there. And of course, this would have been the time period in her life when she had been in Christian Science, found Christian Science, begun her quest through the churches, trying to find answers, and yet also being a normal schoolgirl and having normal schoolgirl ideas and worries and cares. But she always kept to that spirituality as the foundation of her life.
This looks like Moira too. I love this. It shows her determination. She was quite decisive, you know, when she made a decision. So that's what it shows me.
When she made up her mind to do something, she did it, yes. Shoveling snow or making a snowman or crocheting pot holders. Mm-hmm. When we were young, she always really wanted us to do meaningful crafts or chores or something we could sell, or, you know, we really had to sew our own clothes. We would have to sew one thing for every one thing we bought. So that made us, for a time, not our entire lives, but that certainly made us want to sew a little bit faster.
Later on, I think we were really into sewing for a while in the early 80s, but later on we had to take an inventory of our clothing before we could go to a store. We also, if we wanted to cut our hair off, we had to take pictures before, so we could remember what it looked like.
And we had to polish our shoes when we bought them before we wore them and got them scuffed. This is a picture of her with her clarinet and her band uniform. And here she is growing up, becoming a teenager in the 1950s. This is her senior prom picture. And that is Dick Fontaine, her boyfriend at the time, who took her to her senior prom, and they were going steady for a year or more. And of course she loved to dance to the big band favorites, and that was one of the things that Tatiana talked to her about in her interviews. And we'll be playing a few of her favorite songs a little bit later for you, along with some waltzes.
We have some wonderful letters from when our mom went to Switzerland for 1 year, actually. I think it was just supposed to be 6 months, and she ended up staying, getting special permission to get credits transferred from Neuchâtel to back to Red Bank High. It was just not done. But the letter writing campaign was on, and I read all those letters, like, I don't know, like 35, 40 years later, maybe more. But I was very surprised to find that she had hitchhiked in Europe. This was 56, so, you know, safer than later on. I was also very surprised to find out that she took a trip to Paris with a girlfriend, and they went and danced in the jazz clubs.
No, that was Geneva.
Was it Geneva? No, specifically there were letters. Okay, we have a little bit of a disagreement here. Well, anyway, they spoke French. No, I'm kidding. So this was just wonderful to find out all this information when I read through her letters, and then when I would bring it up to her, it was nice. It was nice to see her become animated about that time period.
I think that being in Switzerland on her own really transformed her into an independent woman, and it gave her a lot of confidence that she used later in life. And it also gave her a real feeling of being a citizen of the world. And when you read her letters, you see she's meeting people from all over the world. She went to a school that was an international school, and the common language was French. So I think that this was part of the foundation for her of her ministry, again, all over the world. So we're very glad that she had the independence to want to take this trip, and that her parents actually helped her to do it. And she had many relatives in Switzerland too that helped her. And I also do want to mention that I've been in touch with my mother's cousin Elizabeth. Many of you may have known her, Elizabeth Grappin, who lived over here. She's her second cousin, who lived over here in Montana for many years at the Golden Age Village, and has now gone back to Geneva, where she lives and where she first met our mother. And Elizabeth sends her love to everyone who knew her, and she's very sorry that she couldn't be here at this event, but she was certainly probably our mother's closest relative of that generation. Also Anna Maya Schmidt, Anna Maya Powell now, who lives here in Texas, could not be here, but sent her regards and love to everyone.
And yes, our grandmother did sew full suits for our mother while she was in Switzerland and mailed them in packages to her. And I remember reading in one letter, she said she wrote to her mother, I think they were just a little more intellectual over there in Switzerland, even at 16 and 17, so I didn't get this when I read the letter, but she writes, Mother, please don't send me my 17s anymore. I rarely read them, and they're just embarrassing anyway.
Tatiana's very good with impressions. Sounds like a 50s movie soundtrack. This is Mother with Dick Fontaine again, and a tandem bicycle, which they bought actually partly because of her epilepsy, because she had a difficult time riding her bike with her seizures, so they would ride this bike together, and that was a way for her to enjoy bike riding without having to be worried about falling over or having a seizure while she was riding. And here she is, dressed up for church. This was probably taken when she was in college, and she went to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio for the first year and a half, and then she actually transferred to Boston University.
And an internship at Tufts. I went to Yellow Springs. It was great. We pulled up a record and everything. They were in the 50s. They were very, very avant-garde. If anyone knows Antioch, she was really devoted to Christian Science at that time, and so while she liked some of the progressive ideas there, she just felt it was a little bit too hard given her pursuit, and she was actually also looking for St. Germain at that time.
But some of Antioch did rub off on her. It's pretty apparent when you start to read her papers and her letters home. She definitely absorbed something while she was there. This is a picture of her in the Antioch cafeteria, where she actually had a job, what she was using to help earn her room and board.
I think that one looks like Chantel.
So after moving to Boston in 1959, she met Dag Ytterberg, who was a Norwegian Christian Science student, and this is her with him in 1960, and they were married. They had actually known one another for more than a year at the time they got married, but he had been engaged to someone else, and they really hadn't been, it really wasn't very long after they started dating that they became engaged. But it began really as a friendship within the Christian Science youth community. So here they are at the piano at her parents' home. And this is her with Dag and Mrs. Eva Schofield, who was her favorite Christian Science teacher. And then you can see her mother there on the right. That's Friede, on the steps of the house. So she and Dag came from Boston to New Jersey, and they had a wedding in a church there in New Jersey. And there's a picture of them with their wedding cake. And only less than a year after marrying Dag, she met our father. And she had been, even though she was in Christian Science, she had really been continually searching for St. Germain and the teachings of the Ascended Masters, which she had not been able to find. But she continued on with Christian Science as sort of the next best thing. However, she'd begun attending this group of Ascended Master students, and they told her that Mark Prophet, as I'm sure many of you know the story, and you've all heard it before, that she heard that Mark was coming to speak, and so she said she had to be there, and that's how they met. And so 2 years later, she married our father. And of course, I think that she herself had a difficult time explaining to herself how she had gotten into one marriage and then suddenly met the man of really her dreams, her spiritual dreams, and what was she to do about this? And so her letters do throw some light on this and in this transformation that she underwent when she actually went into full-time spiritual work. Although, of course, after she first met our father, she had spent some time supporting herself while doing the spiritual work when she had time.
Yeah, she gradually moved to Washington, D.C. and had an apartment in Arlington Towers. And beforehand, our dad was typing his letters via several secretaries who worked for different areas of the federal government, National Railroad Administration. No, yeah, the Association of American Railroads was one of his secretaries, and they would type these letters out and mail them out, maybe mimeograph at best. Our mother bought a printing press, and I still don't know how she got it into like a 7th floor apartment in a tower and ran it without someone complaining.
It's true, she was very resourceful. I mean, you think about it, she did run the first printing press of the Summit Lighthouse, and that was a part of her contribution, as also she was learning how to become a messenger, which was what our father was, messenger for the Ascended Masters. So these pictures were all taken from her wedding to our father. which took place in March of 1963.
Is that Sigrid?
Yes, that's Sigrid Carlson over there, for any of you who might have known Sigrid a long time ago. She was one of their very first students, and she stayed in the church all the way up through her death, and she actually moved up here to Montana and was in Livingston for quite some time, so I'm not sure how many of you knew her.
She was one of the ladies I was mentioning earlier who typed up all of the letters from the Ascended Masters.
And Sigrid actually worked for the FBI. So here they are after their marriage. And here's baby Sean, our oldest brother. We're very sorry that he can't be here with us today, but he was the firstborn and of our mother's children, and you could see how just much she loved and cared for him here. So when Sean was not quite 2 years old, of course, the Summit Lighthouse moved its headquarters out to La Tourelle, which was our mother's name actually for a brick mansion. She named this mansion La Tourelle because it had a tower. I don't think you could see the tower here, but beautiful brick mansion that they found and bought for fairly reasonable price because it was so big no one could possibly use it for a single family home. So they were able to move in with their entire staff, which at that time was pretty small. And I was born before they moved into the house. They had been staying in a nearby house while this one was getting ready. So my mother went to the hospital, had me, and brought me home into this house. So it was my first home, and I will always have very fond, beautiful memories of growing up there and of being with the staff. And some of you who were there at La Tourelle are here tonight, and brings back many beautiful memories to see you again. There's the tower.
Wow.
And of course, Mother had her office in the top floor. You can see that window up there with the point, the peak above it. And you know, this mansion had been built by an oil millionaire, and it was really in the French style. And she had a round office up there that was painted pink, which is where she worked on Climb the Highest Mountain and wrote many of her early works. And we children, Moira brought this up today, remember waiting down at the bottom of the stairs for our mother to come down because we weren't really supposed to go up there and bother her or knock on the door.
That happened a lot.
So this is just Dad at La Tourelle at the altar there, teaching. And this is a knighting ceremony for any of you who remember those. And this was a very special ceremony. This was when our mother took on the role of what is called Mother of the Flame. You know, many people didn't quite understand why she was called Mother, why did everyone call her Mother. And you can see the woman that she's holding hands with, that is Clara Louise Kenninger. And the Mother of the Flame was an office that was created for the person who was bearing the flame of the Mother on behalf of the organization and on behalf of the planet. So at this time, Clara Louise passed that on to our mother, and she became known as, not as Elizabeth, but as Mother. And there were, of course, many people who had known her before when she was Elizabeth who kept calling her Elizabeth, including our father Mark, but everyone mostly else started calling her Mother at that point. And so in some news stories it got transformed into Mother of the Universe, which was never really true. You know, it was really meant to, as a sign of respect for the representation for what she held as an office, rather than the idea that she was the Mother of the Universe in some way, a representative of God as Mother. And here she is, you can see her really starting to come into her own. She began to give lectures. She had been giving dictations now for several years. And if you look closely at this picture, you can see the white railing of the altar and the podium. That was all built by our grandfather, Hans Wolf. He built this and he mailed it all out to New Jersey. So even though he never joined the church, he supported her work very much. I mean, he built her bookcases when she married Dog, and he built her an altar when she married Mark. Although I have to say that his did take him a year or so or more to get used to Mark and to get used to the whole idea that she wasn't going to go on to become a United Nations translator. She was going to become a spiritual teacher. And here's a picture, of course, of our parents together at La Tourelle. And here's our mother with Sean. And me. And this is baby Moira, who was born in 1968. 1967, very soon. Her birthday's on Sunday. And of course, everyone who was with them in those days knows that they made many pilgrimages around the world. This is the pilgrimage to India. And I always used to wonder when I was a child, how did we end up getting an audience with Indira Gandhi, you know? And I only come up with two reasons for this. Number one, it was a period of sort of strained relations between the United States and India. And I think that my parents were preaching a message of world brotherhood and toleration, and had sent out a notice of their trip and somehow got an inquiry back from the government of India. And we only really met with her for a few minutes, but it was a special event. And here we are meeting with the monks in Dharamsala. Our father was very curious to see how they did everything in their monastery, and when we came back, all the men learned how, or the kitchen people who worked in the kitchen learned how to make bread the way the monks made it. So we had bread made in their way, which we'd served at La Tourelle. And this is Tatiana's birth, 1972. And here she is with all four of her children, finally all together. Tatiana's under the blanket right now, so you can't see her, but one thing we were really grateful to our mother for is that she breastfed all of us, which was an unusual thing in the 1960s, and she was very determined to do it, and she really wanted the best in terms of health for all of her children. And you can see Sean here, he's wearing a suit from Cape Canaveral, because this picture was taken in 1972. That year we traveled so much. I think it was just the year before our father died, and he did take us to Cape Canaveral in Florida and did Disney World, and then we went to the Middle East, and we also went to Hawaii that same year. So just got a lot in, and our mother brought us all along. She wasn't one for leaving the children at home, you know. She, of course, the staff were there to help out. So here they are with their first co-authored book, Climb the Highest Mountain. And here we are at a Christmas. They always tried to make a really big Christmas for us, even if they didn't have a lot of time to spend with us on Christmas. They always had a really nice celebration. So, of course, our father did pass on in February of 1973, and we talked about that this morning. Moira read some of our mother's remarks that she gave at his memorial service. And of course, after that, our mother's work really did take off, and this picture was taken at the Land of Lanello in 1973, which that July conference was the biggest conference they'd ever had. I think they had around 500 people there. And we had a lot of younger people, and my mother really began growing into her role as a spiritual leader and as a messenger. This, you might not recognize her, but she's wearing a hat there on the left. She's actually leading decrees. Now, one of the things that we did a lot in the 1970s, and if you're with our mother, you really could not succumb to public embarrassment, because, our decrees are very loud, right?
Well, you did succumb to it.
Well, even if you did succumb, you still had to continue being publicly embarrassed, because we had to decree at the top of our lungs in India, out in the middle, in front of monuments or in taxi cabs or wherever.
We were actually imitated once by a big group of guys. They came up after us and started, you know, imitating us. It sounded a little bit like, I don't know, I'm not really sure, an auctioneer and
Something like that.
yeah, and a camel rider in the desert.
But she was very determined to clean up the aura of the planet, and that's what they're doing there. They're giving violet flame decrees, which are supposed to transform the planet's aura. So everyone who followed her was very diligent in carrying around not only their decree books, but also, and there's a picture of Terry Kennedy. I don't know if he's still here, but he traveled all around South America. And we had some, yes, Terry, hi, yay! And he's the one who wrote, I Can Say That I Shook Llanello's Hand, and some of the other songs that, did you write the Virgin of Guadalupe song too? Yes. Yes, we sang that today at this service. And there's little Tatiana down in the front. But some of these men, you know, they were dragging around sound recording equipment and accordions and all kinds of stuff on these trips. So it was really quite an experience, I think, for everyone. At the end of the South America trip, we children all bugged out early and went home because we had been on a 3-week trip, and I think we left a few days early because we were exhausted. But our mother insisted continuing on. So here's our mother with Randall King, whom she married in I believe it was October of 1973, and Randall actually wasn't very involved in her public work, but he was a partner and friend to her during their marriage, and he was with us on this trip in South America. And this is a picture of her with her blue sword, which many of you may have seen, or some of you may have been initiated with the blue sword. And around this time, our mother really sort of innovated a lot in her work with the sword. She would use it for cutting people free from bad energies, from the past. So many people would really treasure the gift of being able to be cut free by her with the sword. And of course, we were always a little worried that she was going to cut someone, but she never did. This sword, she actually had dulled, I think. No, it was sharpened, but she had it painted to titanium sword.
It was pretty sharp. But she kept it, she wrapped it really well. So I guess it was safe in her hand.
And here she is again, continuing her public work. And in this case, I'm not sure if looks like she's baptized.
That's Sean. It really looks a lot like the Chapel of the Holy Grail, but it's not. I looked into it, and it's just the wrong year for it. Unless by some fluke, when she was touring around California, we had an event there, but I really doubt it.
It just looks like a Catholic chapel. And here she is surrounded by Chila's followers. And there's Josefina Lopez, if anyone remembers her. She was a Spanish teacher. And there's me in a yellow dress behind her. And that is how I learned to be with my mother. I would say, Mommy, I want to spend time with you. And she'd say, well, then watch me work. So. And here she is. I just had to put this in because she went through this hooded cape phase in her wardrobe. And it was quite dramatic and meaningful, powerful. And I think we had this picture here, which we have behind us, which comes from 1980. And that is from the Easter sunrise service. She really loved Easter sunrise services, and we really thought that this image here, which we had with us today in the funeral home, was a very fitting image for remembering our mother today. And so here you can see her, she's giving a dictation. And this picture I really love. This image was created for her, what she called her stump tours. She basically, one day in 1977, I think it was, or 1976, said that El Morya had told her to stump, which to her meant to be like a politician going around to different places, standing on a stump and giving her message, only instead of a political message, it was the coming revolution in higher consciousness. So a lot of us remember singing the song, "We're stumping for the coming revolution in higher consciousness." That was the phrase. And at the time she designed these purple pantsuits, or she didn't design them, actually people she was working with, and I know Mary Galloway, who may be here, had a big hand in some of that work. But for a while, a lot of us were wearing these purple pantsuits and in different colors also, and it was supposed to be our idea of a religious habit.
I liked them. There was a period of time, yeah, it was the late 70s, early 80s, you know? But there was a period of time, remember there were Yorkshire beads as well. But toward the end of that phase, there were some really nice, light, very, very light pink, green, and blue and yellow silk versions. And it looked almost like a Nehru jacket if you want to compare it to something in the fashion world, but I loved it when she wore those for her lectures.
They were very pretty, and she did have some made for all of us. When we traveled with her, we wore them too. And here you can see her with President William Tolbert of Liberia. She was invited over as a guest of the Liberian government in 1978, and she'd also gone to Ghana as a guest of the Ghanaian government in 1977. Well, no, 1977 she wasn't a guest of the government, but 78 she was a guest of both governments. Unfortunately, there were coups, and we later learned that President Tolbert had a lot of probably not so nice qualities, but he was interested in her as a spiritual teacher, and his son, Adolphus, was actually in our church for a while. And so President Tolbert was overthrown in a coup, and that inaugurated a period in Liberia of civil war that only recently ended, so that was unfortunate. Here she is. I think this is Ghana, but I could be wrong. And there's little Tatiana down there you can see.
I was mesmerized.
We had many unique and interesting cultural experiences. This is Mother with Adolphus Tolbert, who was, as I said, one of her students. And here she is preaching in Liberia. And this picture is taken on the top of Croagh Patrick in Ireland, where we went in 1980 with our school. We had some interesting school trips. This is the highest point in Ireland.
Is there anyone here who went on that? Michael! Yes, that was a wonderful trip.
And, you know, she had this gift of making any event that she was involved in be special and momentous. So here we are. We're not going around as normal tourists. We're going to bring the flame to every spot that we went. So here we are, and we had, I think she served communion on top of Croagh Patrick. And then you can, this thing she has in her hand is a torch. So that torch was lit. And so you can imagine us, we were about 35 or 40 high school age children there with her and a couple of adults, and it was just really a very different experience for us.
So I often think my hometown doesn't exist anymore, just because it has been a bit of a spreading out of everyone, and there's been changing locations. But I want to say that here tonight, I took a look around when I was doing some of the AV music preparation, and I thought, well, this is my hometown.
We don't have a lot of really good pictures of Camelot. That was one of the things we were going to do. But there are many beautiful pictures available for any of you who have seen it, and of course it now belongs to the National Park Service. But this is a picture of the interior of the chapel at Camelot, and as you can see, it had been a Catholic chapel, and we put our chart up there on the altar. And this was where our mother preached from and did all of her cable television shows during the 1980s. Many of them were recorded right here on that altar. And just because we'd gotten to Camelot didn't mean we stopped touring. So here's us in India, and we actually went to the Golden Temple, which is the centerpiece of the Sikh religion. And you can see us all wearing white coverings on our heads, because that's what you have to do in order to go into the Golden Temple. So Mother's right in the middle, and I'm right in front of her there. And behind her, if anyone remembers Frank Toth, her security guard at the time, who was this also a Taekwondo expert and instructor for many of us. He's also got a white thing on his head. And there's Catherine Nichols, who accompanied us on that trip. So here's the three of us. As I said, anything we did was going to become a spiritual experience. I don't even know what monument this was, but we all had to go up and make V for Victory signs up there at the top. So there we are. And here, of course, in her role as educator and school administrator, our mother officiated at graduation ceremonies for Montessori International. And this is our brother Sean graduating from high school at Camelot. Here's another picture from that time period at the Grand Canyon with Moira and Tatiana.
Grand Canyon of the Tetons?
Okay, fine, sorry.
No. I just wanted to add that in since I remember that trip.
But these are in Montana. And that's her with Sean in Montana. So this was around the time that we had started looking for property up here. And some of these pictures here are from her marriage to Edward, and Sean gave her away, so you could see her on his arm here. And she spent a very long time kneeling in front of the statue of Jesus at Camelot before her marriage, which in our church, of course, everyone got used to having very long events. So I could see, people who've been here since 10 o'clock this morning are still here. You were trained, well trained by our mother, but her wedding ceremony. Her wedding ceremony lasted 6 hours. 6 hours. And she had, well, this was the first time she'd really had a really large formal wedding, and I think she had 14 bridesmaids and groomsmen. So, and I think many of the people who are here tonight might have been in that wedding party as well. I know that Eileen was in there, Teresa McNicholas, Elizabeth Marham,
Timothy Connor.
Larry Stanley, was Larry there? I think.
Yeah, he's there.
Is Kenneth McNeil there too?
Yep. Kenneth is chuckling.
And many of you may remember Kenneth McNeil, who actually died not too long ago. And he was a great friend of our mother's over the years. So here you can see Mother and Edward dancing at their wedding on the patio at Camelot, which was a place where we had many beautiful dances, which we're hoping to bring back some of that memory a little bit later when we will have some waltzing and big band music. These are just some very candid shots of us with our mother at home on Christmas Day. You can see the four of us wearing the same caftan type bathrobe that we had all gotten that Christmas. This was when we lived in California, and for a very, very brief time we had a pool. What happened is that our mother bought this house and then moved out of it and spent about 3 years having it completely fixed up and worked on and renovated while we were living in rental houses and different other units. And then we moved back in for about 6 months before we moved up to Montana.
This was Halloween, 1986, a couple months before we moved to Montana. And there's Christopher Prophet, the first grandson, and Sean's eldest. That was a really fun night at the end of the 7th Ray. We kind of said goodbye to Los Angeles at the time. Right before we went and saw that movie about Therese of Lisieux.
So, the next section is about the Royal Teton Ranch, which so many of you I'm sure have seen. And of course this is the beautiful Heart of Vienna retreat where we had so many of our summer conferences. And here, Mother and Edward on the altar. I really see this was around 1988. I see this as really her peak of, power and charisma and dynamism as a speaker. I think she looks very relaxed and happy here in this picture. And this is just a picture of her giving dictation in the tent. You can see there are probably 3,000 to 5,000 people there in the tent. The whole altar setup was put up there in the tent in the middle of the wilderness of Montana. And this is one of her Summit University forums, which was one of her cable television talk shows that she was also recording at the time. And here she is with Murray Steinman. Murray's going to kill me for putting this picture in.
Such a great picture. This is how we saw her before she went out. Always working.
Exactly. She would be going over her lecture notes. And this is July 1st, 1988. And Murray was a great help to her for many years and support to her behind the scenes. This is another picture. It's really not very good quality, but this shows her continuing ministry in cities around the world, not just in Montana. This was taken in New York in 1989. And this is a picture we took at a family Christmas around that same time. Well, as you can see, the family's been growing a bit. Now she has Chris, we have Mark who's standing up, and Sean is holding up his son Lawrence to be baptized, and I've got Victor in my arms. I've got Tatiana up there too. And here's a picture of our family. Actually, we did take a trip to Alaska in '87 and really enjoyed that together. And this is our family at Lake Powell in Arizona. You can see Mother holding Lawrence. So she really enjoyed, she really loved being a grandmother. What's your birthday? Is this her 50th birthday?
There's a date on it. 89.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this would be her 50th birthday in 1989. And this must be Edward's birthday that same year.
Sorry, Dad.
And here she is with Victor on the beach. She really just had a wonderful way with children. I think anyone who saw her with children would attest to that. And here's some more pictures of her just in her role as messenger. This is 1992. You can see her never stopping to cut people free and use the sword to challenge whatever forces were causing people to be sick or troubled. She really saw herself as a rescuer of souls, and that was what she spent a lot of her time doing, giving prayers for people. And here she is at another conference. And here we have a family milestone.
Go ahead.
This is Tatiana's college graduation, 1992, from Northwestern University. Our family was there for it. And here she is with two of her two grandsons, Victor and Lawrence, at the time were the youngest. And here she is with all 5 of the boys. You can see it was very difficult to get them to hold still. And this is Seth. And finally, this picture was taken in 2000. Our whole family was together, and you could see Seth quite a bit younger than he is now. We were all together, and really, she was so happy to see us, and we were so happy to see her. And it was beautiful weather, and it's hard to believe that was really 9 years ago now. Well, we've spent a lot of time here talking to you about our mother's early life and the work that Tatiana did to learn more about her early life. And this was a project that was embarked on not just by Tatiana, but by other members of the church staff. And there was a lot of work put in on all sides on this project, which never really came to fruition because our mother really was the controlling editor of this project, and she became ill right around the time Tatiana was trying to finish the book, and at that time I had already left staff. So,
Okay.
What?
Oh, no, I had worked on it with her when I was in college, but her priorities were the teaching, So she took some time one summer to look into it, and then other times she would, get excited about it or decided she didn't want to be the one to write it. She wanted one of us to write it, so it took various incarnations, but we had this great material waiting.
And when we began working on this project, it was never really clear whether it was going to be a history of the church or a biography of Mother or both or something like that. And there was always just way more material than you could ever put in one book. So what we have done actually is we have put together a book that is about our mother's early life. And it is her memoir. It is written by her. But we have strung it together, and we have included a lot of really incredible, wonderful material from Tatiana's interviews and also from our mother's own letters, diaries, school papers, and other material and family photographs. The book is here, and we finished it. We really wanted to finish this during her life, and we're so happy that we were able to put it together. I think it will give you a perspective on her life that will really help you understand her a lot more. We included a lot of material that you've never heard or seen before from her letters that will show her as a human being on a spiritual quest, like many of us, who had divine gifts and talents. And I hope that it will provide you all with some insight on your own spiritual quest, no matter where that quest takes you. And what her drives were, and what fulfilled her, and what sacrifices also she made to take up her mission that she believed. I just want to thank Tatiana for the work that she put in, and I want to thank all the staff at the church who had worked on it at different times as well. There is much more material that may someday be published by different groups, but this is really her life before the summit, up until the time she took her first dictation. And I believe that really only her daughters understood that part of her life well enough to put it together in this form, and I hope that it will be well received in the intent and the spirit that we put it together for all. We have about 90 copies of the book here tonight for people who want to buy it. If you are interested, or if you're watching online, it's available on iUniverse, the iUniverse.com website. You just go to the iUniverse.com, it's a self-publishing site, and search for Elizabeth Clare Prophet. The book is available currently in hardback and softback. Thank you.
Wait, this is online? I would have edited my comments more. I'm kidding.
I just want to read you 3 very short excerpts from the book. This is a poem that our mother wrote to her mother. And our mother really didn't write poetry. It's one of those little schoolgirl rhymes that you might write, but I thought it was very sweet. And it gives a side of her that really you can't get from her herself. You have to look at her former self through her writing in order to understand it, because she obviously wouldn't have remembered this. Mom, I love you, dearest Mom, because you are so kind. When I get mad and disobey, I really and truly try to mind. I know I've made you mad. I know I've made you sad, but still I am so very glad that I have you for my mom. This is Mother's Day, 1950. This is a little bit later. She wrote this about her adolescence. She wrote this just going into college. It's a paper that she wrote about her social skills, really. Looking back at my growing up years, I recall that I had a very difficult time becoming socially adjusted and accepted. During the first 14 years of my life, this problem was an acute one. I suffered much in the process of solving it, but through the transformation, my present treasured values were acquired, and for these I should live it again. Eventually, I learned social adjustment. At the age of 9, I started to attend Christian Science Sunday School. My teachers taught me to love my neighbor as myself and to love God with all of my heart and with all my soul and with all my might. This was the beginning of my transformation. I strove to be good and leave behind my paternally inherited instincts. But it was not until I was a freshman in high school that I was able to achieve this, glorifying God sufficiently to manifest the constant joy which has been mine ever since. It was then that I became accepted in my crowd. It was the most popular girl in it and had enough boyfriends and dates to satisfy any girl. I acquired self-confidence and poise. Gradually, I learned to disregard my outer shell, no matter what it seemed to express, seeking the good and always finding it. Thus, my love for mankind became boundless, and today I can sincerely quote Will Rogers, who maintained, "I never met a man I didn't like." This book will also give you some interesting insight and background into the stories you already know and love so well. I know that many of you are familiar with the story of how our mother first found the Unveiled Mysteries I Am book in her parents' library, and that she took it with her, and she read it on the train on her way to college in Antioch. But this is the actual letter that she wrote home to her parents about that train ride. Monday, September 23rd, 1957. I had a very enjoyable trip, much more than expected. The train was crawling with Antiochians. We took over the smoker for the most part of the evening. A couple of boys played the guitar and another had a wash tub. We sang and got acquainted. I read most of the book, only slept a few hours. I've actually printed and reproduced here copies of some of her letters. You can actually see her handwriting. That's a taste. I hope that you will enjoy this book if and when you decide to get it, and I'm glad that we can have it here for you tonight.
Hello, people.
So we're going to have the song now if everyone wants to come back in. Chantel, Bridget, Victor, Mark.
Waiting for everyone to get in.
Sage. Did you want to say something?
Hi, people. I haven't said anything yet, so I just want to dedicate this song to my mom. And we're doing Let It Be by the Beatles. And we've only practiced it for one day, so if it really sucks, then you'll know why. Yeah, so let's go.
1 and 2 and. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary calls to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. And though they may be parted, there is still a light that I will see. Not until tomorrow, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary calls to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom. Let it be. Join in, please. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Whisper words of wisdom. Let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Yeah, let it be. Yeah, let it be. There will be an answer. Let it be.
Hi, I'm Chris Kelly. I was on staff from 1989 to 2002, and I had the privilege of working with Mother on her editorial team. And we all know how much Mother loved perfection. And you know, like if you burned your toast, it was a bad thing. You know, if you any accidents whatsoever was because you weren't really paying attention. Well, one day, Mother and I and a few other people went down to the river to do a little bit of fishing. She lived right near Yellowstone River. And we were taking one of those rare moments off. And we were down at the riverside, and the bank was really muddy. And she's walking in this mud and getting it all over her. I think she had like white cowboy boots on. And she's getting it all over her boots. And she looked down and noticed it and wasn't real happy with it. And I said, well, Ma, I said, you know, I could fix that real quick. Come on over to the river's edge here, and I'll just wash them off for you. So she walks over to the river, and I grab her foot and knock her right into the river. And there she is, sitting up to her waist in water. And I'm going, I'm dead. And she stands there, and she says, well, don't everybody just stand there. Somebody grab a camera.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lucy Crown. Most of you may know me as Lucy Kraszewski. I'll give you the 10-second version of my story, and then I'll tell you why I came up here to give my testimonial. I'm a retired police officer, shot point-blank range with a 9mm pistol 3 times. First bullet went in underneath my right eye. The second bullet came out one side of the head. Third bullet went through my leg. And I had found the teachings 1 month before that event. And every time I do the sealing of the decree service and say, when a light bearer is in need of an immediate transfusion of light, I can attest to the fact that knowing what I know now, I was indeed one of those light bearers in need of that immediate transfusion. But not only that, one of the keepers called Mother the day after I got shot to tell her, and so she put me in the tag for healing, which allowed me to come to my first conference 1 month to the day after I got shot, which in itself is a miracle. But the true miracle I came up here to share with all of you is that I was a police officer, and so I had heard many things about the church. So being a police officer and knowing the press, I knew not to believe anything I read or heard, and I was going to check it out myself. So that was my intention. And I had no idea who Elizabeth Clare Prophet was in terms of her mantles. So I came to meet her and talk to her and figure out what was going on with this church. And so I went to her secretary booth in the main tent, and I said, I'd like to see Mother, you know. The person said, well, nobody sees Mother during a conference. So I must have walked away pretty long-faced because for my purpose, I thought I just wasn't going to fulfill my purpose for being where I was going to be. So someone saw me walking away, and they said, well, you know what, if you need something, you can write to Archangel Uriel. He told us we could write to him. So I said, well, pray tell, how do you write to an angel? Well, to make a longer story much shorter, I was called up on the high altar by Guru Ma herself that same year. The very next day I wrote to the Archangel. And she asked me to give my testimony after she gave a presentation on Thomas More. And then she hugged me. At that time, I had no idea what she was really doing for me. But now, knowing what I know now and through my meditations, I realize that hug and that love of her heart has kept me on the path for 15 years now. I have a beautiful daughter, and I thank Guru Ma for all the sacrifices and love, and every one of you, every time you give that sealing of the decree service, and pray for those light bearers, because I was one of those, and I am grateful for everyone here, and especially to you, Guru Ma. I love you with all my heart and soul.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to think about what I'm going to say. I do public speaking all the time, but this is a little bit intimidating. My name is Catherine. Most of you know as Catherine Dukas. Most of the men on staff knew me as Captain. And when they saw me coming, another project. I joined staff in 1975 in Colorado Springs. I joined under the duress of my sister after she came back from Mount Shasta, and she said, I'm going to Summit University in the fall. Wouldn't it be good if we went together? And I said, I guess, maybe. So then what she did is proceeded to tell me about decrees and do the Jesus Watch, but tell me all the terrible things that happened on staff and how cold it was and how hard you worked, and it was amazing. So one morning I woke up and I said, I'm going to Summit University. It was 2 days later. So we had the opportunity at the end of Summit University to meet one-on-one with Mother. And my sister Sheila went in, and Mother was talking about me, and you brought your sister, and that's so wonderful. And Sheila said, well, you know, I told her some of the good things, but I told her a lot of bad things too.
And Mother said, "What?" She goes, "Well, I didn't want to have the karma of her coming here and maybe just taking off." And she goes, "How did she stay?" And Sheila said, "I don't know. I guess she did." So I think Mother recognized that in me, that I have a lot of determination, and I also think that she developed a lot of that in me. Because when you want to work and you love to work, you definitely have the opportunity with Mother and the Masters. There's no end to it. I do want to say this. I think that Mother gave me the skills in the most intense way to develop my identity, to develop my soul and my personality, not the human personality, of course, but my personality to succeed in this life. And even in my business today, I use a lot of those skills, such as listening, really learning how to listen, really learning how to take notes, knowing rules, but as every staff member knows that worked for Mother personally, there were rules, but there were rules. And the rule was, don't follow all the rules. If you know the rule, then it's wrong. If you can figure out the rule, it might be right. So I did have the rare opportunity of working with her. I had the rare opportunity of working with her family for about 13 years. I thank God every day for the opportunity, and I have no regrets in life and love the training that I got. Thank you, Mother.
Catherine and I worked together for many years, but she didn't recognize me yesterday. It's been about 24 years since we saw one another. Anyway, the last time I spoke publicly was after we completed a 28 stump tour, and I told Mother I didn't want to speak. And I had just finished a public speaking class that she personally coached me at. And I decided at that time, at the last minute after everybody got up and spoke, that I would speak. And the story that I told was that I never knew Mother as a spiritual teacher. To me, she was a mother. I left home when I was 14. I lived on my own. My boyfriend was my legal guardian. He was a biker, and he had just gotten out of prison. And I spent, when I first came with Frances to our first service, I had no idea what I was getting involved in. And she wanted to go home and work on her marriage, so I came on staff. And it was about 3 months later, 3 months later, that I had a dream. And I had a dream that I was one of Mother's daughters. And I'll never forget that dream because in the dream, I was in the kitchen and I was with her daughters, and we were all in our pajamas in the kitchen. And the first time Mother called me, she asked me to come and meet her in the sacristy. And when I came up there, the girls all came in one by one in the kitchen, and they were in their pajamas. And anyway, so that the first time I did her hair, I did her hair and her makeup for about 8 years. And the first time, I think I had about 104 temperature, and I couldn't understand why everybody, you know, I didn't know her as a guru. I just knew her as a human being. I used to dream that she would give me a piece of gum, and I just knew her at such a human level. And the first time she came with me to the hair salon that I went with, she sat me down and I told her all about my childhood, about my mother and my upbringing, and she had asked me if I knew if there was any countries in South America. And I couldn't remember anything, and I think I guessed Argentina. And Mother looked at me at that time and she said, "I cannot leave you how I found you." So she took me back to Camelot. I drove her home in my Volkswagen van. And she put me in Montessori school, where I went for several years in Montessori junior high and high school with her children. And I also took Montessori teacher training, where I became a Montessori teacher, never to be a teacher, but just to heal from my childhood. And then we went on, after Montessori training, I went to learn all the different maps of the world. And I remember I was in a sensitive period in Montessori, and I went through all the countries. I learned all the states and all the oceans of the world. And the last country that I did was South America, and the last piece of the puzzle that I put in was Argentina. And I remembered her words, "I cannot leave you, I found you." Shortly thereafter, she took me to see all the countries that I had just learned about. She just held up a sign. I remember in public speaking that our grade went from an A to an F when we gave a 60-second speech, and if we didn't end within 2 seconds. So I just want to thank Mother, because my life has not been the same. Montana has been my home. I'm leaving on Sunday to go to Bali for a month, and I'm putting my house up for sale, and I'm leaving Montana. So it's... I just want to thank everybody.
Well, I've written down my words. I've never spoken before so many faces. I know a lot of your faces, probably not many know my face. I like to represent the caregivers. I didn't talk about it with them, but they're not on the list. So I'm here as one of the caregivers, and I feel blessed to have been in her life, in Mother's life. I entered the church when I was really young. I was 22 years, and I left when I was 36, just to grow up a little bit more on my own. And it's been a ride ever since, and I'm very grateful. And then well, here's my paper, but I'm going to make it not too long. Just one day I was contacted to be her caregiver. I didn't know about her state of affairs. I didn't know she was sick. I didn't know nothing. So I kind of fell out of the sky. I'm not part of the church anymore, but I know many faces. I'm grateful for your energy, your light, your laughter, your beauty, your wisdom. And I'm very grateful to have picked up that energy again by being around her and her family and caregivers. And so for me, where shall I just start? I'm going to read a little bit because my brain is getting scrambled more and more here. I looked after her all right, but I think she looked after us too. She was very present, although she was maybe Alzheimer's sick. She was very present. And we all know her smile. Once the smile locks on your face, she indeed looks right through you, she sees you, and she's very compassionate, very loving, and beautiful, and present. And that's actually my biggest gift that I got from her, really over those 4 years. That smile I recognize, because I never worked for her own staff. I was just a Sheila on the path, doing my own thing and raising my family. I'm from Holland, so I made the trip back and forth. But her smile, that was the one for me to be really, really recognizing that I was in the right place. Because I wasn't sure if I was in the right place caring for her. Coming where I come from and being a little young maybe and energetic, and I wanted to move around, but hey, this is not a moving job. This is a job to be with her and give my presence and
care. Anyway, that is that okay? I'm sorry. In this slowly unfolding dance with a lady so beautiful as she was, so sweetly and so immensely graceful, I came to call her Ma. I just called her Ma. I didn't call her Elizabeth. That was kind of strange in the beginning. But Ma was good for me. She has such a wisdom and depth in her smile again, and she conveyed her smile to me whenever I had a little crisis going on in my life. I would just fall on her lap and cry. I would. I knew she wouldn't say anything back. I knew I was very safe, but I just had to release. Okay, I need to move on here. So I want to thank you, Ma, for having me sit with you, and for all the caregivers having this cutting edge of awareness, so beautiful. All the caregivers, Murray and Claude, and I'm really grateful to have known the family and been with all you guys. She was always in good care. She was really, really, really beautifully cared for, and I'm very grateful. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
My name is Deanna Campbell, and I have the wonderful good fortune to be a parent in Montessori International at the time that Mother was also a parent in Montessori International. And so I learned many parenting skills from Mother, along with the wonderful leadership that she taught us. My children, I had 4 sons in the school, and they were as much out of the school as they were in the school. And those of you who know Montessori know that a great deal of the learning took place as the children were out of the school and then back into the school. Well, this was a cycle where my oldest son was out of the school and was actually quite out of the school. But I was working closely with Mother at that time. She was doing some stumping in Los Angeles. She was at the Whole Life Expo. And I had been working with her for the preparations and driving her at that time. And I had a wonderful little car that Mother loved. It was a Isuzu, and I can't remember the model, but it was a little sports car. And Mother really liked that car. And we were scheduled to go to the Whole Life Expo. And the day before, my oldest son, Adam, came to me to borrow the car. And I said, well, that's fine, just be sure you have it back. In fact, you'll have to come and pick me up at the warehouse, because that's where I'll be working late. Well, the warehouse closed down, everybody went home, and everybody, as they left, said, Deanna, you want to ride? No, my son is coming. Well, the last person left the door, turned out the lights. It's, Deanna, are you sure? I said, oh, no, he'll be here very shortly. And the lights went off, and if you remember where the warehouse was, it was a long way away. At any rate, Adam never showed up. And I ended up having to walk to Simi to get a ride home. And before long, I learned that he had not only not returned my car, he would not be returning the car because it was totaled. Now, by the grace of God, Adam was safe, but the car was completely demolished. So the next morning when I went to pick up Mother, I was driving my husband's car, which was a Thunderbird, which she did not like nearly as much as she liked the little sports car that I drove. So as we're going along, she asked, well, where's your car, Deanna? And I'm trying not to be angry, but I said, Mother, you know, my car is demolished. It's totaled. It's no more. And she said, well, what happened? I said, Adam, you know, he just took it off and he just demolished it. Not a word. She never spoke to me the whole rest of the time on the way. So at any rate, in 30 seconds or less, when we got to the event, Mother didn't want to see me anymore, and she told me that I needed to go back to the warehouse, and that evening she wanted to see my son and me. So I brought him back to the dinner that night. This is not going to make a whole lot of sense, but we got back to the dinner, and my son has got the long hair, the earrings. I'm absolutely mortified, and I bring him to the table. Here's my son, Mother, and she looks at him with the most loving, kind, melting smile, and she said, in a way that she was absolutely certain I would get, she said, "Adam, I love your hair." She taught me how to love.
Ed, you need to come here because this is the camera mic. Okay, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Edward Turner. I worked in the farm and ranch. I came to the activity in '78 and singing a new song with that wonderful class of people who came at that time. So I ended up in the Chicago Teaching Center in the early '80s, and Mother was scheduled for a visit. So we were busy cleaning and doing everything, and then somebody said, "Well, they're here, the car's out in front," but no Mother. So I was busy going around with a little damp rag, wiping dust, and I just happened to be at the side door, and there was a knock. So I opened the door, and it was Mother, and I said, "The Mother of the Flame!" And she stepped up the 2 steps and gave me a really big hug. And I don't know if some of you remember, I was like a sidekick to Herbert Beigel. And he once told me, he said, "If you ever get a chance to hug Mother, don't be the one to let go first." So I just held on to her. My nose was pressed in her afro, and I just held on really tight. And she finally let go. And so she went up in, and everyone got a big hug in the whole teaching center. And they all just, well, they thanked me afterwards. So I ended up on staff at the ranch. And I was in the farm and ranch, and we were pretty far away from everything, but we had telephone duty and radio duty. Because before the whole staff moved up, we did a lot of talking on the radio, and Mother would be up on the hill in her bus. And so I was on, it just so happened that I was on duty when the first big conference was in the evening, and everything was just all over the place. Moira was missing. She gave the slip to the hairdressers who were watching her, and where was Moira? And I remembered people talking about getting the fire from Mother, and I realized I was in for it that night. So I just let my chakras spin like a freewheeling fan. And so every time she gave it to me, which happened about 7 times that night, I just let my chakras spin, let the light go through. And we got through the night. And finally, at the end of the night, she says, "Good night, and thank you very much." So that was neat. But one night, I'm sleeping on the cot behind the desk, and I hear the radio. Now I get up, and it's Mother, and she says, "Dial this phone number." So I dial the number, and I get, "This number has been disconnected." I go, "Sorry." She says, "It's the royal number. Just dial that number." So I dial the number, and it's those people from Canada where Freedy was dying or something, and she needed to talk to them. And so I have to translate on the radio, and she said, so this guy in New Jersey says, "Well, everything was fine. Archangel Michael took care of everything." And so I go, Alpha Base to Omega 1. He says that everything was handled greatly by the admirable conductor. if you remember the Archangel Michael Rosary. So that's the best I could do. So anyway, in '88 we had a big dust up in our department, and she took my dossier to the altar, and the word was, "Ed Turner belongs on his own off staff." And so I had to go in and have an interview. And sure enough, I get this wonderful hour and 20-minute interview after all that time. And she actually said, "Well, I could probably stay after she got to know me." And I said, "No, that's okay. If they're willing to let me go, I'll go." And so I was gone, and it was wonderful. Plus I got 2 months severance pay, which everybody said was unprecedented.
Well, my name is Terry Kennedy, and I've spent many a wonderful moment with Mother. And I think one of the cutest stories that I can tell about Mother was when we were in South America, and we were going around. John Fox had his accordion, and I had my guitar, and we'd climb these pyramids and get up on the top of them and sing songs and make calls and bind the energy in one thing and another. And so we were doing that time and again. At one point, I took John's accordion and took it up there, and he dragged my guitar. But anyway, I don't remember which pyramid we had just come down from. But we went back. I went back and sat in the bus. Mother was sitting right behind the driver's seat, and I was sitting next to Mother. And she was so sweet, you know. She really treated me like a brother at that time. And so I'm just chit-chatting with her, and she's writing over there, and I'm just chit-chatting along, having a good time, making small talk. She says, "Terry, would you please be quiet? Linnell's giving me the names of some black magicians."
Hi, my name is Kathy Garcia, and I actually wanted to tell a story that happened about 1.5 years ago, and it was with Tatiana. And I was at the Pine Creek Cafe, you know, pray, and there was a salsa band I knew, and my husband likes doing salsa, so we were there. And I was sitting down, and all of a sudden somebody comes up to me and says, "Kathy." And I said, "Oh my gosh, it's Mother. It's Mother the way she was when I first saw her in 1979. And I said, "You know, I can think you can tell from the stories you've heard that we live on miracles. I mean, miracles, we were used to it. We live on miracles." I said, "Well, anything can happen." And then Tatiana said, "It's Tatiana." And it was great. I gave her a big hug. And I really wanted to tell Tatiana, you know what? Come home. This is home. And so hearing Tatiana's remark today, let's give her... So hearing Tatiana's remark today, I thought one of the most amazing and wonderful accomplishments of Mother's life is that she brought us together. She brought us together. So many of us, and when I came in 1979, of course, I can say that Moira took care of my 28-year-old sons when they were toddlers, and Tatiana sang at my wedding in 1994, and I had many stories that Erin and I could, you know, about Erin when she was in high school. You know, we have written on the pages of the chapters of life together, and many of us had a great sense of aloneness before coming together. So Mother brought us together, and we've separated, and Mother's brought us together again. And I hope that after today, we stay together.
If I could please ask the speakers to stay in this area, if you don't mind. We're actually recording with this mic, and the PA is this mic, so thank you.
Hello, my name is Joyce Cleveland, and I came into the teachings the year Tatiana was born. Hitchhiked to my first conference, didn't even have a driver's license. I would like to second that about Tatiana, wherever you are. There you are, coming home. You're home in our hearts. We love you. And I would like to also say that I had made a discovery during this last week or so since Mother passed, and that is that, you know, the Chila is the extension of the Guru. And I'll tell you what, our heart's love for Mother is just welling up. And therefore, our heart's love for all of her Chilas, every one of you. I love you. And my story comes from the 1980s when I was in the Minneapolis St. Paul Teaching Center. And I really wanted to find the right man and get married. And it was like foremost on my mind. And I was very preoccupied with someone who, you know, expressed an interest and asked Mother, etc. And I was thinking about him night and day and, you know, really thinking, well, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And Mother came to the center to give a service, and you know, there was everyone around her and all of her entourage, and so she was very unavailable to talk to privately. And I thought, I've got to ask her. I just have to. And there was this moment after the Sunday service. She was standing alone. There was nobody within 3 feet, which was terribly unusual, so I walked right up to her. I was about 1 foot in front of her, and I said, Mother, I would like to know if I'm supposed to marry so-and-so. And she looked me straight in the eye, and she said, I keep my mind clear, and I don't allow it to enter into situations so that I can hear what God wants to tell me. And that's all she said. And since then, by the grace of my guru telling me that admonition, I have learned to really listen to my inner voice, and my attunement has grown and grown to the point where I even have friends who are amazed sometimes at the insights that I gain. And I have to acknowledge that it was Mother who started that for me, and I am so grateful. The inner voice. You know what? I have been single ever since. I don't think I was meant to get married, so I think that was, you know, Mother was maybe trying to save me, but she didn't tell me what to do. She just told me to listen to God. And I started listening, and I never got married. So, all right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Edward Sodi. I was on the AV department, audio-video, for many years. And for about 5 or 6 of those, I had the job called listening post. I had to sit up in the, or I got to sit up in the front row, and my job was to just never take my eyes off of Mother. She made that clear to me. And I would count decrees, and if she had messages, she would whisper them to me, I could hear them, and then I would relay them out, you know, to the AV people, and then they'd have, you know, whatever she requested carried out. But I was in trouble numerous times because it was a very sensitive spot. I wasn't supposed to move, but on the other hand, I was supposed to count decrees with flipping cards, and so I had to keep them in order. And you know, if I dropped anything, then I had to kind of like wait till she wasn't looking and grab it really quick before she looked back and stuff like that. But I always felt like I was a total disturbance up there. And as most of you know, there was times when you really couldn't disturb anything. Anyway, there was a dictation was on the way. She was sitting in the one of the chairs up alongside the altar, and I did something, and she told me about it, no uncertain terms. I could hear her, nobody else in the audience could, and I had to keep looking at her, and she just was kind of like looking at me, you know, with a kind of holy glare. And anyway, I was feeling like, you know, I was more of a hindrance than a help. So at that point, I just visualized a little bit of love coming out of my heart toward her, just a little bit of pink flame coming out of my heart. And at that point, as soon as I did it, she kind of made a face and just kind of looked away from me immediately. And it took a while to sink in, but I realized she was stifling a laugh. Because I think I was so pitiful, and this little bit of squirt of pink ray coming out of me, you know. Anyway, it gave me an insight and a little better about, you know, the sort of person she was, and it was a kind of a precious moment to me. So thank you, all of you. Bye-bye.
Did Seth want to say something? Did Seth want to say something? Or, okay. I have to share one last story. Can you indulge me? Because Edward Sodi just reminded me of it so poignantly. I had just gotten my first headset sitting in the front row, which means I could hear everything going on in AV. And anybody who worked in AV knew what a circus that was. So I had a headset. Frank Black came and put it on my head. I didn't really like it, didn't really know what I was supposed to do with it, but I had 2 channels, Mother's channel and AV. It was an intense service, the height of intensity. Screen came down. A video played. Then usually the screen went back up. William Adams says, Deborah, are we putting up the screen? I don't know. What do you guys normally do? You're AV, you decide. I think we should put it up. I said, okay, put it up. And when the screen got to the top, it went. Mother stopped decreeing and, who gave the order to put up the screen? I was a mute. But Mr. Pink Flame over here, I looked to my left and I could see the letters forming. D, E, and I thought, he's spelling my name. B-R-A. Deborah. Mother says, with absolutely no passion whatsoever, I've just been informed that it was Deborah who gave the order to raise the screen. Deborah, you may now leave. Now, if you were there, it is a long walk from that front row by the AV, both of whom were like this. Terry Johnson and Michael McKeever, we had nothing to do with that. And this was the sound. You had to go past the first section, the second section, and every person in that court as I walked by. And Mother said, you can wait there until I call you. All the cars left. The service ended, and I was still decreeing in my office. 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, I thought, certainly it's time for me to go home. So I went home. But I knew better, that I'd better be back on time. So I came back at 7:30, and Mother called. She said, you will now have the next week in food services. You will work in food services in the morning, and think about the decision that you made to raise the screen. To this day, I'm holding that over William Adams' head. But we share so much karma together, it would take another whole day. But anyway, an insight to the precision of the mind of the guru. Sometimes you just didn't know which way to call it. Okay.
are one, we are one, we are one. No, too high. I'm sorry. I don't remember the song very well.
How about
okay.
Vine?
How about this? You are a child of the light. You were created in the image divine. You are a child of infinity. You dwell in the veils of time. You are a son of the Most High.
May the Lord bless and keep you.
You are a child of the light. You were created in the image divine. You are a child of infinity. You dwell in the veils of time. You are a son of the Most High. You are a child of the light. You were created in the image divine. You are a child of infinity. You dwell in the veils of time. You are a son of the Most High. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. If you're happy and you know it, say I am. I am. If you're happy and you know it, say I am. I am. If you're happy and you know it, and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, say I am. I am. If you're happy and you know it, do all three. I am. If you're happy and you know it, do all three. I am. If you're happy and you know it, and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, do all three. I am. We are all special children. We want the world to be free. We are all special children, and we want the world to see the love, joy, and peace to the nations that comes from deep in our hearts. We are all in together, and we want to live in a da-da-da. We are all the children of God. They have the right to be truth and in joy and in peace, understanding and truth and harmony. Well, I thought anyway. So, meditation. Yes, let's keep you. May He let His light shine upon you and be gracious to you and give you His peace and give gracious to you and give you his peace, and give you his peace. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord's light shine upon you. May he let his light shine upon you, and be gracious to you, and give you his peace, and Lord bless and keep. May the Lord's light shine upon you. May he let his light shine upon you, and be gracious to you, and give you his peace, and give you his peace, and give you his peace. Well, I think it's time to have a moment of silence for our mother, probably a little bit more than a moment. I'd like to call it a meditation. Aaron, anything? No? Okay, so our moment of silence begins now. Should all the acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should all the acquaintance be forgot and base of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for
We'll have a closing prayer now, and I'd like to do this, well, a little bit differently. Let's give the closing prayer together, okay? And we'll hold hands, and I guess we're going to, at the conclusion of a closing prayer, we're going to do the squeeze hand tradition. We'll see where the two squeezes connect somewhere in the room here. So, for our closing prayer, let's go into our hearts, and then I'm going to ask that we all together just repeat, if we're so inclined. So, dear Lord God Almighty, our Father, Mother God, we open our hearts in gratitude. We have such a great love in our hearts this day. We thank you for the opportunity to know one another. We thank you for the opportunity to know one another. We thank you for the experience of knowing Mark and Mother. We thank you for the experience of knowing Mark and Mother. We pledge to you that the blessings that we have received, we will multiply in our individual lives. We will share with one another. And we will use to change this world. Bless us, guide us, defend us. Send us on our way. We truly love you. There is no separation. Yea, God. Yea, us. Always